So for our next speaker, it is somebody who I'm going to say I have been surprised about her creative genius and spark, and for her ability to think out of the box, and for her ability to go where none of us would have dared to go. And that is in planning this event. And that person is Esther Duflo. When Esther talked to me about almost a year ago about the vision for this event, I said, sure, I'll come out with a vision. So I go out with a vision, which is 9:30 inauguration speech, 9:35 discussion about randomized impact evaluation in Rajasthan, 9:42 implementing partner. And Esther looks at this and says, this is garbage. Now, of course, she said it a little more colorfully than that, and these days I just assume it's French and I don't get it. But I think so many of the different things that you're seeing in today's event, including this video and including getting the RAs to send videos and making all of us try and bring out the other side of JPAL, a lot of that has to do with her just thinking out of the box. I think it's the same thinking out of the box that has made her so famous among so many of us. So ladies and gentlemen, Esther Duflo.
So I had this nagging feeling as the morning was progressing that I was being set up. And no, I sort of feel this is where it went. I don't think I've been stage fright since I last was 10, 10 years after I was born. And I think I'm a bit stage fright now. I think Michael, starting with everything being on time, and then Michael and my French accent, and then that video, and then Bono. It's like, okay, fine. I can't really follow the act very well, so you'll either forgive me or put it on the account of the emotion or the pregnancy hormone or whatever. Thank you all for being here. 10 years, about more than 400 projects, and at some level we are just about starting. You've heard this number, 165 million, over and over again. We like it for many reasons. One of these reasons is that it's bigger than 100, which was the target that Mohammed challenged us to put on paper some years ago against our best judgment, which turned out to be the wrong judgment. But 165 million is really very, very little in comparison to the hundreds of millions who stand in need. And really, when you look at the quality of the decision-making and policy-making the world over, from India to the US, it's really 7 billion, and maybe counting fast, who are in need of better policy-making. So how come we've been so slow? Isn't the recipe relatively simple? You start with a project. It's going to take a little while, of course, because you need to see time to see the impact, and maybe give or take 2-3 years. Then, of course, the policymakers won't read the paper. Michael told us you need to have your policy team do a brief, get it 2-3 months to do it just so. Then you should be ready to go. You should be able to find an NGO, a corporation, a government, someone to take that idea and run with it. So at the beginning of JPAL, this is really how I saw how things were going to play out. Maybe that's only me, but that kind of was my view of how things were going to work. And what I thought was really missing is that we didn't have anything to say. There was so few tools in the toolbox that if anyone had come and say, well, what should we do about any problem linked to poverty, we didn't have enough to say. And this was true, and of course this is true, to a large extent still true. And it fills me with joy and a little bit of pride to see a lot of people engaged, and more people are engaged in the business of generating this evidence, generating these tools. It's key. So, and sometimes we've been fortunate to see this relatively naive view of how ideas would translate into action play out. I was in the room when a bunch of very successful entrepreneurs and a couple of minor royalties got so excited about deworming that they were starting to jump up and down talking about kids' poops just because of the study by Michael and Ted. And this is kind of a moment you do remember. But by and large, over 10 years, a bit more than we've done that, I've learned two things. The first one is that our contribution as nerdy, wonky social scientists, as Bono just said, is often not to find a particular intervention, but to chip away at a problem of long enough and persistently enough that we can try and identify the lever that will improve a particular solution. That lever may be in a different place, in a different context, but it will come from the same general principle. And that will involve running several experiments to find out the general principle, and then experiments that become much more context-specific to try and see how that general principle embodies in a setting or another successfully. And that takes maybe a lot more time than originally envisioned, but the payoff are huge. The second lesson I've learned is that when you do have such a lever, there is a question of how it's going to be adopted, how it becomes policy. And there it's not either someone will take it and implement it, or nothing can be done because there are so many interests and so much corruption and this and that. The thing is that it's kind of somewhere in the middle where you have to find the space. You have to find the space in the policymaking where it is possible to insert some change. Rukmini's description of the long history of JPAL with Pratham is a perfect illustration of the first one, so the first point, so I don't need to spend a lot of time on that. We are now have, I think, a pretty good idea of what needs to be done to improve the quality of education in developing countries. And it's deceptively simple. It's teaching the kids what they don't know, but just what they don't know, what you think, not what you think they ought to know right now. That seems really simple, but that's really, it took us a while to get to the understanding that the entire systems, from parents to teachers to curriculum, are staked against that, and this is why it doesn't work. And it took us experiments in India, in Kenya, in Ghana, and a lot of these experiments had nothing to do with teaching at the right level. There were failures and detours along the way that made only sense ex post now that we can see all of them in one setting. So what I want to spend the last few minutes I have about is the second idea, is the second learnings that we've progressively come to, is how do you find a space for policy to happen? And I'll give 3 examples of that. The first example, again, comes from the idea of remedial education. Once we finally come up with this general principle, how do you embody it in a program that has the potential to touch a large number of children? Pratham's original model was to work with volunteers. And this has a lot of advantages. In particular, the fact that you have many, many, many young, energetic people who are willing to lend their enthusiasm, often for free, to do that. But it has one little minor problem, is that it's kind of hard to get hold of the kids, which are a little bit necessary if you want to teach them, because the parents don't necessarily realize that they have a problem, they don't send them, this is not part of the thing. So with Pratham, we thought, okay, the next step is really to take advantage of the children when you have them, when they go to school anyway. And for that, we need to get the teachers on board. And we did a first attempt to try to get the teachers on board in Bihar and in Uttarakhand, and that failed. The teachers were trained, and they really liked it, but they never implemented the methods, and so nothing happened. But what we learned in the course of running the program and the monitoring that goes with it is that there were 2 reasons why this was the case. One is that they didn't have the space because they continued to have the curriculum pressure, and the others, they didn't have the support. So what we did next in Haryana is to change these two things, and then that did work. 1 more hour in the school day, and devoted to that, and the support of a cadre of inspectors and support people. A second example is one where it failed. We had a successful program with Seva Mandir to monitor their teachers. Very simple program. You're paid if you come to school. How do we know you've come to school? You take a picture of yourself and the kids. That worked very nicely. We try, with government support, to translate that to nurses also in Rajasthan. That failed miserably. The nurses broke the machines, and then the doctors gave exemptions when the nurses weren't present. So nothing happened. In fact, if anything happened, it made things worse, because after some time, the nurses realized that, oh, but nothing happens when we don't show up. So they decided that it was delightful and continued that way. Rima and Iqbal took this lesson to heart and really tried to improve both the quality of the machine by giving incentive for keeping the machine in time, and the incentives and the fact that the doctors didn't have the ability to give free exemptions. Despite that, it still didn't work. And there was reasons to do that, but maybe where it leads us is maybe we are approaching, in this case, the problem totally the wrong way. Do we have a solution? We don't. Like Roosevelt said, it makes sense to take a method, try it. If it doesn't work, admit it frankly and try another. But above all, try something. And this is what we're going to do. It's a very exciting nut to crack. The third example is work with the police in Rajasthan. And there we proceeded in several steps. In the first one, we try a bunch of things to try to get something very simple to do, is to get the policemen to be courteous to the people they speak to and to register their complaints. First, we did a series of things, going from training to extra monitoring to community monitoring. And that sort of worked, in particular the training. It turns out that one reason why police are not nice to citizens is that they don't know to be nice, or they don't know how to. But we figured we hadn't pushed the needle far enough. So one morning in the South Indian joint in Jaipur, we realized that how can we find a space within the government to create incentives in a system where it's illegal not to do your job, and therefore we cannot reward you to do your job, which has a certain kind of pervert logic. And we did find that. We found a group of people who have such a horrible posting that they are willing to work hard in order to get posted elsewhere. We gave them incentives saying, if you do your job, you're going to be sent back to a regular posting, and they were pleased. So where does that all lead us? I guess it leaves us at the threshold of the next 10 years. Without a clear roadmap, we spare up a slightly different idea of where we even want to be. I think the trials and errors that we've experienced in these last 10 years, they are not growing pains. They're here to stay. They're here because it is not that easy to do that. But to change lives, we have to change minds. And I'm pretty confident we can do that. And if we come back in 10 years, we'll make substantial progress in this direction. Thank you very much to all for being here and helping us.